Well, let me hand over the floor to Ginger, our samurai pest warrior. And
I don't know about that either.
We'll learn a lot about taking care of our gardens in the summer.
Okay. We're doing bugs, slugs, and furry thugs, and we're going to break it up into, we're going to do insects all the way to snails. We'll stop and have a break there, and then we'll go from snails all the way the rest of the way through bear. Some of the stuff, honestly, I felt pretty knowledgeable until I started looking up stuff, and I realized how much more there was out there I just didn't know. So everything on here, take with a grain of salt, and that it works for some people. That does not mean necessarily it will work for you. Some of them are tried and true, yeah, everyone agrees, and some of them are a bit odd. So, like having a ferret that you walk through your garden every day. So we'll go from there. All right. Oh well. Thanks for coming. Everyone needs a bag. You should have a bag, and in that bag you should find some soap. There should be a dryer sheet. You're going to have a rubber band. You're going to have a Ziploc bag, and 2 or 3 other things. There's also an identification chart that's going to come around to you because we're still laminating them when we finish the bags. Alright, so today we're going to discuss common garden pests, how to identify them, and your plan of action for removing them from your garden. We'll look at chemical and organic methods of removal of the pest. Alright, honestly, bugs are attracted to weak plants, which means if you have plants in your garden that maybe didn't start off healthy, or your soil isn't accurate, as far as the pH, the nutrient content, that affects how your plant grows. And when your plant doesn't grow as well as it should, it sends signals of distress, which many of those bugs are able then to recognize. Alright, your soil should have a pH of between 8.5 and 5.8 and 6.8. Organic material needs to be visible, and by that doesn't mean huge hunks of bark or whole leaves, but you need to be able to see organic material in your soil to help give the nutrients that it needs. Good mineral composition, and that can be obtained through products you choose to put on it that you collect and put on, or it could come from straight fertilize. You have to have nitrogen for green leaves, a phosphorus, so a phosphate, which stimulates root growth and flowering, potassium for sturdiness, as in support and structure to the stems, and disease resistance, and then trace elements, things like you have to have calcium, iron, and if you have deficiencies in any of those things, it causes problems. If you're worried about disease, I know some of you were talking about blight, you were having a discussion about that you had a hard time with certain pests you seem to get in your ground and not be able to get rid of. There's some things you might want to consider doing. I do crop rotation and things like that, but you might also want to do solarization of your soil. And to do that, what you're going to do is you're going to till under the remaining plant material, add in your soil amendments for next year, pull out any excess weeds that happen to be in the area, and then smooth it out with a rake so you're getting rid of lumps so you get even distribution of the heat. And if this were our field, we'll go in, we'll pull out the clumps, we'll pull out the rocks, smooth out our location, and then we're going to dig a trench around, we're going to dig a trench around it, and the trench needs to be roughly between 8 inches and a foot deep, and the trench is as wide as the shovel, and you're going to go around your garden with your trench. You're going to set a sprinkler up, and you're going to let it sit and hydrate your soil for many hours. So it's not going to be just go out there with a water hose, sprinkle over it. Make sure your soil is good and saturated. Then you're going to lay clean plastic over the plot. Go after you get it all the way over. Make sure it doesn't have any gaps. Make sure it's completely covered over if you have to do 2 layers. And then fill your trench in with the soil. And then sit back and wait for spring. It takes, if you do 1 layer of plastic, it takes, I think it's 90 days doing 1 layer of plastic. And if you do 2 layers of plastic, it's supposed to take 30. And it also depends on the thickness of the plastic that you use. But either way, that gives you a way to bake your soil and help remove any disease or pests you might have. Other things you need to be doing You need to do crop rotation, and crop rotation can't mean just simply one season. In some cases, it takes 3 to 5 years to completely cycle through if you have larvae forms and stuff that are growing from a crop. You have to do timed planting, and for this, there is a little bitty notepad in your pack, in your bag, and that little notepad is so that you can take notes about your garden. So if you start looking and you go, well gosh, every year I plant cabbage and I try to plant them in mid-April and every year they get eaten by bugs, then maybe you need to consider doing your cabbage earlier. Maybe you want to think about when you first start seeing signs of bugs eating on those plants, and you want to adjust your calendar so that it more accurately gives your plants a chance before those bugs hatch, before those bugs are there to attack your crop. You can, if you document, we document everything down here. We document the first time we hear frogs, we document when we spray, we document temperature, the weather. Every time you document, that makes you a little bit more knowledgeable for the next year. And so if you do that year after year, eventually you go, oh, there's a pattern here. Every year I notice this at this time. And if it's a problem, I can then adjust my planting so that I get a better crop yield. Maybe it's a thing that every year my tomatoes almost get ripe, and then a certain turtle comes and eats them. Well, maybe I want to pick my tomatoes before they're fully ripe, and I want to set them up and let them ripen, you know, on the picnic table. That's what the documentation is important for. So you have a little pad so you can do documentation. The other thing is companion plants. And for companion plants, things like marigolds to deter insects, or dill, plant it somewhere else. So then the insects that would be attracted to whatever it is you're planting will instead be attracted to another crop. And it depends on the insect, what you're looking for, but dill is a really common one that insects are attracted to. All right, let's discuss identification. So now you have a little identification sheet. And that identification sheet is laminated so that you can keep it handy dandy close by. So flip it over and make sure you know which side is which so that you're not killing the good stuff. And then it's got a little key at the bottom, and the key at the bottom on the side that's got the barcode tells you, like, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it tells you like if it's a sap sucker or a leaf eater or things like that. Okay, so to discuss aphids, this is our very first thing. You're going to find that you have Q-tips and you have a yellow piece of paper, and on every table there is a container that has petroleum jelly in it. You also have a Ziploc bag. And we are going to make aphid traps. Insects are attracted to the color yellow, and if they get attached to your petroleum jelly, they're not going anywhere. So if you're concerned that you have bugs, you have aphids and or something of that nature, you can trap them. You can trap them, and that can be used for removal, or you can trap them for identification purposes. So now what you're going to do for me for your aphid traps is you're going to open that can or container of petroleum jelly, which is this, and there should be one on each table or somewhere. Everybody got a container? You guys got one? Okay. We're going to open it up, and then you have some baby-safe Q-tips. Gives you a larger surface area to work with. And you're just going to put the petroleum jelly all over it, and then put it in your sandwich bag, and you have it for whenever you actually get to the point where you have aphids. So you'll have your little trap, a yellow plastic plate, you know, and then you can even pour, look. They're attracted to plants that have been overnourished with nitrogen, so be careful about doing too much nitrogen. Sunflowers and milkweed are excellent trap crops. They do not like garlic and chives, nasturtiums, petunias, so plant. Those are things you can plant interspersed in your garden for that purpose.
Oh, those are aphids, huh? Little green. Wow.
You want to make sure you can see the light.
There's some little babies on there moving around.
Now these guys
There you go.
are big. I'm going to let you see it. No problem. All right.
You can wait that
All you got.
Yeah.
So with petroleum jelly, you can use that as a sticky trap. Now you can actually buy, there are pre-packaged kits that you can do. That'll do the same thing and cost a whole lot less. It came in a pack. I think you got 6 of the yellow and then several other colors. If you've got children or Bible school or anything like that, save them for that. And use the yellows. For $1, the petroleum jelly was $1, and two little tiny containers of petroleum jelly did 6 tables. So I would think one little jar of petroleum jelly would get you for quite some time. So there's not a lot of expense there, and it's a good just tester. All right, ladybugs. Ladybugs are ferocious eaters. So they are just aphid magnets. As far as they can find aphids anywhere, they're wonderful. So don't be angry with them whenever they come in your house, you know, when spring first starts. Side note, do you know why they're a different color now?
They're the Asian ladybugs. They're not.
That is exactly right.
Yeah. That's, I don't know which way, if you're talking about, when you say ladybugs are good, whether we're talking about both varieties.
Both varieties are aphid eaters.
Are they?
Oh, okay, that's good to know.
But the Asians are, according to what I read, Asians are and this is what I read a good while back. Isn't that the case? My Master Gardener people. They're crossing over. They're actually interbreeding. So that's why you're getting a multitude of colors. That's why you'll find like the periodic red, and then you find some who are pumpkin color, and then some who are a different color, because they're all intermingling. And from what I understand, it began about, initially, the first crop came over in crates in California, and they're just more resilient than the American ladybug. So the American ladybug girls are picking out the Asian ladybug guys, and we're making mixed ladybugs. So from now on, when you look at them, you're like, they're just not the right color, you'll know why. All right, so ladybugs, and that includes all ladybugs, are good for aphids. There are other bugs that are also good for aphids, but that's the most common. The insecticidal soap, dormant oil, oil and insecticidal spray work well on aphids. Both of those can be used. Gabriel was supposed to tell me about that. Give him just a second. I'll go on down. Homemade tea. Oh, now this one, be really careful with. You can use cigarette butts in a jar with water. You let them soak, and then you extract the tea. A lot of the stuff that we use out in the greenhouse actually has nicotine as a base. So that's not far-fetched. It just sounds kind of gross. If you happen to smoke, that's an easy way. If you don't smoke, then acquiring those butts might be harder. The book I read suggested that you go and visit local, you know, like hospitals and places where they have waiting areas and just extract the butts. So I guess you just have to take some gloves, put on your gloves, and go extract the butts, and then use the gloves to pour the stuff into your container. But maybe you know someone who smokes, and that'll take care of it.
How about just getting a little bag of pouch of tobacco?
You know, I don't know if that works as well, because they suggested it had to be smoked butts.
Oh, really?
So I'm not sure if it has something to do with activation of heating that causes that to work. They're all over the leaves, but on the bottom is where, like, if you're not sure if you have them, if you'll flip them over, that's probably the first place you want to look.
Okay.
But as they get bigger, you notice they were all over those leaves once they get older. But with that tea, you have to be really careful, because it is poisonous to humans, poisonous to animals, and it can carry the tobacco mosaic virus. So that can affect other plants in the process.